Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here with a spoiler-free review for Swift and Nomad by R.J. Anderson. So in the past, I probably would have called this a series review, but actually one of the reasons I'm doing this now is because I'm really excited to say that these two books are going to be republished, and we were actually getting the third and final book in the series after many years. These books went out of print quite a while ago, and we just kind of never got the third book. We weren't really expecting to, but now that they're being republished and we are getting the third book, I am really excited, and I thought now would be a good time to review these books so you guys can see if it's something you're interested in picking up just in time for the re-release. It's a series I really love, and it's one that I think is really underrated. So I was so happy to hear that they're getting republished and we're getting the third book, and I feel like I can more actively talk about them and review them or like recommend them on my channel now that they're actually going to be in print again and people can actually get their hands on them. So the first book in the series is Swift, and that is going to be republished and released on August 18th, which is very soon. And then Nomad is book 2, and I think that one is releasing in a couple months, maybe October, I'm not actually sure. And then the third and final book is called Torch, and that is going to be releasing in February of next year. So not too long to wait, and yeah, I'm just really excited. This is a series I have loved for quite a while now, and I never dreamed that we would actually get that final book, so I am just super excited about it. I mean, this is like a reader's dream come true when a series that has been out of print that you love comes back and you actually get another book in the series. Like, I just am so excited about it. So as I said, this is going to be a spoiler-free review, so you can decide if you maybe are interested in picking up the series, which would be perfect timing with the re-release of the first book. And I also want to mention I'm going to list content warnings in the description box for this series as well, if that is something that you want to check out. So the first thing I want to mention about these books is that they are a separate series. R.J. Anderson has written several books set in this world. There is the Knife trilogy, I think it's called, and that is loosely connected to this series. There are a couple of characters who cross over, but you can definitely read these books without reading that series before that. They are pretty much completely separate apart from those crossover characters. And I can say from experience you don't need to read that entire trilogy because I have not actually finished that series. The first time I read these two books, I had only read I think the first book in that series, and even that wasn't really necessary to understand like what was going on or anything. So have no fear if you have not read any of R.J. Anderson's other books, you can jump right into these, no problem. So in Swift, we follow our main character Ivy, and she is a creature known as a Pisky, and her people live in this old abandoned mine shaft to protect them from humans and from like predators and everything. And several years before the start of the main part of this book, Ivy's mother has actually gone missing. And what she's been told is that her mother was taken by Spriggans, which are this other magical creature who are the Pisky's mortal enemies. And that's what Ivy has grown up believing and being told. And then she starts finding out some things about her mother's disappearance that makes her start questioning what she has been told, and if there might actually be more to this and to what happened to her mother. So she ends up reluctantly teaming up with a Spriggan named Richard. That's not actually his real name, but you don't find out his real name until much later in the book, so I'm gonna call him Richard for the duration of this video. And the two of them end up going on a journey to try and figure out what actually happened to Ivy's mother. And as they pursue this, they start to realize that there might be something even bigger and more dangerous going on. So one of the things that I find really interesting about this series is the place it occupies in kind of like genre and age range intersections, because I would call this like mostly a contemporary fantasy, but the feeling of this book and the feeling of the setting and the characters and the fae or fairy lore and everything is much more like old school kind of fair folk stories, which I really enjoy. Like there's a very like traditional kind of magical fantasy feeling to it, especially as regards the like different fairies or the kinds of fairies. And another thing I think is really cool about this series is I personally feel like it's a series that would work both for people who are fans of fae or fairy stories and also for people who aren't or who don't tend to like the like tropes or kinds of stories that have been like associated with fae stories in recent years. I feel like the series could please readers of both kinds because it does have some like traditional fae folklore, but it's like older fae folklore, so it kind of feels fresh and new. And I think R.J. Anderson does a great job of using this old folklore in really creative ways so that she makes the story feel fresh even as she makes it feel very like traditional and like the old school kind of like fair folk mythology and folklore. So I really love that balance there. And the series also kind of straddles the line between middle grade and YA, which is something I tend to really enjoy. I don't remember the exact age of our characters, and because they're not human, it might not even be like applicable, but I think that this is a really great kind of bridge series between middle grade and YA. I think if, let's say you primarily read young adult or new adult or even like adult books and you go into this one expecting a young adult, you might be thrown off a little bit, but I think if you go into this kind of expecting it to it to be not clearly middle grade or YA, I think you would really enjoy this. I think I'm actually going to hold up book 2 because that shininess is probably very distracting on the other one. But as I was saying, I think that there's some story elements that people tend to associate with middle grade and some that people tend to associate with YA, and I think this series does a great job of incorporating both of those as the story demands it. And I just think that's really cool. I don't feel like it's pinned down to one age range, which is a thing that I love. Also, as related to the like old school kind of fairy folklore, I think the series actually draws on some specifically Cornish, like from Cornwall fairy folklore, which I think is really, really cool because these books are set in Cornwall. And I thought that was a really fun and interesting thing about this series. So now getting into the characters, which is I think one of my favorite things about this series, Ivy as a protagonist is really wonderful. She's really capable and smart and compassionate. And we can see even from the beginning of the series that she's really smart and she's really good at figuring things out. But people underestimate her for various reasons. And it's really satisfying to see her prove to people that she's always been smart, she's always been capable, and to see her get to explore more and get to use her abilities more is just like really enjoyable and satisfying. And then another character I love and probably one of my favorite parts of the series is Richard, who is the Spriggan that Ivy ends up teaming up with in the first book. He is just such a fascinating character. He's also really, really clever and he has a very complicated past. And seeing him and Ivy work together and like slowly start to like unlearn these prejudices that they have about each other's species is just really, really great. I love seeing their teamwork turn into this grudging friendship and eventually this really deep respect for the other person. And even though there's some like bumps along the way with them learning to trust each other or understand each other, their relationship is just so well developed, and it's just like a highlight of the series for me is seeing them change in the way that they view each other and like work together and learn to appreciate each other. They're just such great characters separately and together, and I love both of them. I also want to mention the plot. So even though I'm not like a plot focused reader, I'm definitely more of a character person. I really enjoyed the actual story of these books and the directions that R.J. Anderson took the story in. And something I think is really cool is like I have read this series before. It's been a few years at this point, but I have read both of these books before. And when I recently reread them, there were developments that happened that I did not see coming even the second time I read it. So like I didn't see it coming the first time, and then even on reread, I like didn't know what direction things were going to go, which I just think is really cool, especially as somebody who tends to be really good at guessing things in books, and also who tends to have a pretty good memory for books. The fact that I was surprised a second time by the direction things went was really, really cool to me. And then finally, one of my other favorite things about the series is the themes and issues it covers. And I'm actually going to just like read from some notes I have of like things that I came up with off the top of my head that these books deal with, and to varying degrees. Like there are some thematic elements that I think are more prevalent in the story. Like this idea of unlearning prejudice is I think a pretty strong thematic element in the books, especially in the first one. That's like a pretty significant part of the story. So some of these themes or issues are things that are like more, I think, extensively dealt with in the story. But even the more subtle ones, I really appreciate. I really appreciate the way that this series is an entertaining story that also deals with some more serious underlying issues. So like I mentioned, there's that idea of prejudice that is dealt with a lot. Sexism is also explored. There's this really great short scene in the second book that is basically a takedown of the like nice guy trope, and I just loved that. We also deal with doing what is right versus doing what is easy, and especially as that relates to people choosing to live in ignorance because it is easier or it feels safer. We also have the exploration of grief, the idea of forgiveness, and if people can change, how much people can change. This idea of history not always being right, and reckoning or coming to terms with things that your ancestors did and how that affects you. There's just a lot of like really important thematic material I think that is covered in these books, and not in a way that feels like it's beating you in the head with like a moral or a message or a theme or anything. They're just really seamlessly worked into this story and into the world and into the characters, and I just really, really enjoyed that. I thought that was done excellently. I just thought those were done in such a great way. We're balanced with a story that I really enjoyed and with wonderful characters, and I just really, really enjoyed this series. I gave Swift 4 stars and Nomad 4.5 stars. So I really, really loved both of these books. I am so excited for book 3. And I just think this is a series that deserves more attention. I think it does a lot of things really, really well. So I hope that if it sounds like something that would interest you, that you give it a chance and check it out and get excited for the re-release of the books. I have already pre-ordered mine and I'm very, very excited about it. There was also a pre-order campaign that I think might actually be running still for book 1. So I will link that information down below if that is still like active, if you can still get the pre-order goodies if you submit your receipt, possibly for library requests too. So yeah, please comment down below and let me know if you guys have read this series, what you thought of it, or if you're planning to pick it up. I obviously really enjoyed it, and I know I've said this a lot, but I can't even explain to you how thrilled I am that we are finally getting the last book in a series that I had thought I just would have to be like satisfied with never finishing. Like this is just a reader's dream and I am ecstatic. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!